friends, welcome back. I thought this week I would do a little chatty paint with me video. I've been working on my painting practice lately. I've been trying to improve. I've recently bought a really high quality scanner and have been figuring out how to edit my traditional art to make the things digital, which has been very exciting. It took me a long time to figure it out, but I'm making some good progress on that. I thought maybe while we're painting together here, I would chat with you a little bit about the books that I read last month. I read a total of 9 books, and all of them I rated above 3 stars, which was pretty good for me. I had actually 4 5-star reads out of 9, so the year is off to an excellent start in terms of my reading life. I'm going to go through the books in order of lowest starred to highest starred, and then within each category of stars, they're not in any particular order. One of the first books I read this year, which felt very appropriate for a January book, was The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I watched the Netflix show, how many years ago was that? I watched the Netflix show. I thought it was okay. Watching somebody organize and tidy up definitely helps motivate me to feel like organizing and tidying up. And I definitely did do quite a bit of tidying while I was listening to this book on audio. I was tandem reading, listening to it, depending on what I was doing. And overall, I thought it was good. I felt like it just could be boiled down to maybe even a couple of sentences, which is mostly just don't keep things that don't make you feel good. Her big thing is, does it bring you joy? Does it spark joy? And if you go into cleaning anything up with that mindset, it helps you to just let go of a lot of things that just are not serving you anymore. Obviously, there's some things you need to keep, because they have a function in your life. But my toaster, for instance, doesn't bring me joy because I don't personally use it that often, but it brings my kids a lot of joy. So we keep the toaster. Interesting things like that. There's a few things that were just a little bit woo-woo. There's at one point she claimed that tidying up helps you lose weight because you're mentally tidying your brain at the same time, and somehow that helps you to lose weight, which I thought was a little woo-woo. She gets a little, I don't know what word I'm looking for, a little pretentious maybe, a little condescending sometimes about the people she talks about and what they had and weren't letting go of, that she felt like they should be letting go of, or her attitudes towards the way people store things. She was really bitter about how people organize their socks. She is of a strong opinion that all socks should be folded, and any other method of storing or sorting your socks is egregious. How dare you not fold your socks? There's even one point where she talks about how every time she comes home, she literally takes every single item out of her purse and puts it in its proper place, and then the next morning gets every single item and puts it back in her purse. And I know for some people who switch purses quite a bit, that's probably something that you do, but I feel like a lot of people don't switch bags on the daily, and that just seems like a huge waste of time, in my opinion. But anyways, overall, a good book. There are just some little things that I was I kind of don't agree with that. And I don't feel like if you personally prefer to have your socks organized one way, that it means you're incompetent at organizing. So that was The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. Okay, the second book that I have on my list here is Kingdom of the Cursed by Carrie Maniscalco. and it's the second book in a series, I believe, the Kingdom of the Wicked series. And this was interesting. I rated it 3.75 stars. I found this to be a little bit confusing because the first book was definitely marketed as young adult, but this second book is definitely not young adult. Like, it gets explicit really quickly. I'm still not sure how I feel about that. I don't know. I don't like the idea of starting a series off as being written for a certain age group, and then the next book it goes into it turns into an adult book. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit confusing and could be alarming for some parents who like to filter what kind of books their kids are reading. But anyways, the book overall was okay. I really loved in the first book how it was kind of like, it was a fantasy romance, but it kind of had this really big murder mystery aspect to it, where this girl is trying to solve the mystery of her twin sister's murder, and ends up accidentally summoning a demon of hell, and then having to have him help her to figure out what's going on. And then the second book continues that she still doesn't know what happened to her sister. And she's still trying to solve this murder. I can't go into detail because it's the second book and I don't want to spoil anything, but it does, like I said, get very explicit very quickly. The whole book kind of takes place in like one setting, so it's not a kind of an adventure story anymore. Everything kind of happens in one setting. I would say it's much more heavy on the character development side and less on the plot or adventure side. But anyways, that one, I mean, it was okay. I already read the third book as part of my February reads. Overall, I would give the whole series about the same, about a 3.75. Okay, this next book is called The Bodyguard by Catherine Center, and I also gave this one 3.75 stars. It was a nice little refreshing contemporary romance. I picked it up kind of as a palate cleanser between books. It's nice and brief. I think it's under 300 pages. It was nominated for Best Romance for last year, but I don't think it won ultimately. I love that it breaks the gender stereotypes. I mean, when you look at the cover, you would automatically assume the bodyguard is the man, but it's actually the woman, and she is super confident in her ability to do her job, and I absolutely loved seeing that in this book. She struggles with feeling like she deserves or is capable of being loved by someone else, and that's the thing that she's really working through in this book. She gets assigned to protect a very good-looking, obviously, I mean, it's romance, the guys are almost always written as good-looking superstar, and he is visiting his family, and so she's interacting with him and his family, and it was just very sweet. Overall, I enjoyed it, but I mean, it wasn't gripping. It didn't hold my attention. I mostly just kept reading to be able to finish the book. But overall, yeah, it was a light, easy read, and I would recommend it. Okay, now we're on to my 4-star reads. The first one is called Swordheart, and it's by Ting Kingfisher. I've really been coming to love her works lately. I think this is my second book by her, but I also have The Clockwork Boys on my Kindle, which I'm looking forward to reading soon. But this is called Swordheart. It's about a woman in her 30s, and she receives an inheritance from an eccentric uncle, and her family is not her family, her in-laws, are not happy about it. She ends up drawing a sword due to some circumstances in the book, and finds out that the sword is a magical sword, and there is an immortal warrior who is trapped inside of it and is bound to protect whoever draws the sword. So it goes into her adventures with dealing with her in-laws and her inheritance, and they end up traveling, and he is protecting her the whole time, and they develop a relationship with each other, and it's very funny. The banter is excellent. She is known for being someone who asks a lot of questions, and so many questions that she tends to overwhelm anyone who is trying to have a discussion with her. And so the escapades that gets the characters into is really entertaining. I would definitely categorize this as a cozy fantasy. I mean, there is some darkness to it, but overall it felt like just a cozy, like, found family adventure story, and I gave it 4 stars. I would have given it 5, but I got a little bit bored kind of towards the middle. It felt like there was a lot going on that wasn't really necessary to the plot in the middle of the book, but it definitely picked back up at the end, and overall I enjoyed it. So in January, I finally picked up Ninth House. It has been sitting on my bookcase for well over a year. I grabbed it because I love Leigh Bardugo's Six of Crows duology. I loved that book. I was okay with the rest of the Shadowverse books. I mean, they were so-so for me. They were like 3 to 4 stars, but the Six of Crows duology was definitely a 5-star read for me. So I picked this one up, but then I never ended up actually reading it because I just heard such mixed reviews, like that it was really confusing and people got lost in it really easily. So it's just been sitting on my shelf. But the second book in the duology came out this year, and I was like, well, maybe I should just read it so that I can know if I want to get the second book or not, because I don't like keeping series on my shelves where I only have one book from the series. So I was like, I'll either read it and get rid of it, or I'll read it and I'll continue with the series. And overall, I actually enjoyed it. I do understand what people were saying about it being confusing. It is about a girl going to Yale who doesn't really fit in there. There's a set of circumstances that occurs that puts her in Yale, where she's investigating and overseeing these secret societies on Yale campus that dabble in magic and kind of the dark arts, and just the adventures that gets her into. She has a special ability that makes her unique and uniquely qualified to do this job. But she has a very dark and difficult past that she is dealing with. It is set at Yale, and it is very confusing. The world building is, we're in dual timelines, like it's jumping back and forth between her past and her present, and it's trying, throughout all of this jumping back and forth, it's also trying to explain what her special ability is and what the magic system of the world is, and then a ton of references to things at Yale and like practices at Yale and the buildings and the history and the quotes that are lettered on the walls and above the doors and the architecture, and all of that gets really muddled, and I don't think I had a firm grasp on what was happening until at least halfway through the book. So I definitely understand why people said it was confusing. But overall, I liked the story, and I felt like once you got past that halfway point, it was, following the stories, and any future books in the series would be pretty easy and understandable. I definitely feel like Leigh could have really cut back on the descriptions of specific things about Yale. I think if you actually went to Yale, then that you would find that really interesting and fascinating. But a lot of it was just unnecessary if you're not reading it for the nostalgia of Yale University. But anyways, overall, I recommend it. I am planning on reading the second book next month. And yeah, Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I gave it 4 stars. Okay, and now on to my 5-star reads. So there were 4 books that I read this month that were rated 5 stars by myself. The first one is actually a duology. So 2 of the books are part of this duology. It's called Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. And I had heard such great things about this book that I had it on my list, and I finally started reading it just before Christmas and didn't finish it until January, at which point I promptly picked up the second book, which is called Muse of Nightmares. I rated both of the books 5 stars. This was so beautifully written. I loved the way the author describes things, and her writing style, I mean, it was just completely unique, and I loved every minute of it. It's about a young boy named Laszlo Strange, and he has a dream of solving the mystery of the lost city of Weep. When he was a kid, this city was a magical place. No one was allowed to visit it, but people from that city would come and visit and bring stuff to trade. And when he was playing, he was pretending to be a warrior of this lost city, and suddenly he couldn't remember the name of the city anymore, and the name of the city had been replaced with a different name. But he knew that there had been a previous name, and when he asked other people about it, they couldn't remember the original name either. Everyone could only remember this new name, and promptly people had stopped coming from that city. No one knew what happened to it or where it was, and everyone who had tried to go there had never come back, and he was just bent on solving this mystery. So he spent a lot of time researching it, and he gets presented with an opportunity to actually go there and help solve a problem. There's also a second point of view from a girl who lives in this city, and she ends up in Laszlo's dreams. I'm not going to go into more detail than that because it gets into a lot of the magic system and the world building, and this is definitely there is a plot, but it's definitely very, very character based story, and I loved it. I absolutely loved every minute of it. It was amazing. The second book was really stressful. I mean, there's some things that happen that give you that feeling of being trapped, like you're trapped in a situation that you can't get out of, and that's one of the things that I really hate feeling when I'm reading a book. But I love the characters so much that I pressed forward, and luckily things ended well for some of the people that I was very concerned about. But anyways, I would 100% recommend this series. It was beautiful. The story was great. There is fantasy and romance, and it dives into some really deep issues like prejudice and stereotypes and war. And I felt like it did a really good job addressing those issues and shining a spotlight on those kinds of harder topics. But yeah, 100%, please, if you like fantasy, pick this one up. It was so good. All right, the next book, which was also a 5-star read and is also part of a duology, is called Fire Endless. The first book came out, actually I think both of these books came out last year. The second book came out right at the end of the year. It's called A Fire Endless, and the first book was called A River Enchanted, and I gave that one 5 stars, so I definitely wanted to pick up the second book in the series, and it did not disappoint. This one I would say was very similar. The reasons that I liked it was very similar to Strange the Dreamer. You have more than one perspective going on. It is very character driven. There's definitely a mystery going on that the characters are trying to solve, and it does deal with the magical, it does deal with the spirits of this world that they live in, and it definitely also addresses topics of prejudice and stereotypes and war and conflict. So yeah, I would say that Strange the Dreamer series and the River Enchanted series were very similar in that respect, and they're both duologies, and just delightful. The writing was really good. The character building was amazing. I fell so in love with some of these characters that I would not be upset to have more books to read that included them in it. So maybe that's something that will happen, maybe it's not, but I definitely recommend this duology as well. 5 stars. Okay, and last but not least, my last 5-star read from January is Tress of the Emerald Sea, and this is the Secret Project #1 by Brandon Sanderson. I don't know if you've heard of him or if you're aware, but he did a big Kickstarter last year that just broke all of the Kickstarter records. He wrote 4 to 5 books during COVID, and didn't tell anyone about him, and then released a Kickstarter where he was going to send these books out, one every 3 months for the year of 2023 for the people that backed the Kickstarter. So the first book was called Tress of the Emerald Sea, and it was beautiful. I absolutely loved it. It was very whimsical. It wasn't the same as the books that he normally writes. It definitely had a narrator who was narrating the story. You might be able to call him an unreliable narrator because he has a bias. But he had it was a humorous narrator. The story is about a girl, and she's on a quest to save a boy. It is kind of a pirate adventure, but the seas that they sail on are not made of water. They're made of spores, and the spores can be very dangerous when they get wet, which helps to create a lot of problems and conflict throughout the story and the adventure. Sanderson said that it was inspired by The Princess Bride, and I would definitely agree with that. It definitely felt very Princess Bride-like with the humor and the type of adventure that it was. He said in a video or an interview, I don't remember which it was, that they had watched The Princess Bride, and his wife said, how would the story have been different if Buttercup had gone looking for Wesley instead of just assuming that he was dead? And that summarizes what this book was pretty accurately. I feel like it was a girl, pretty ordinary girl, living an ordinary life. The boy she loves leaves on a boat and never comes back. And she realizes that no one else is going to save this boy unless she does something about it. And so she sets off to find him and rescue him, and then events transpire from there, and it was just delightful. I loved it. It had so much heart in it as well, while still being quirky and being a fantasy, and I really, really enjoyed this and would really recommend it to just about anyone. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I wanted to try something a little bit new. I really love watching other people through their creative process. It just helps get my own creative juices going and makes me feel more inspired just in life. So I hope that did something like that for you. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you are always enough, and I hope you have a good week. Bye.